something that might blow your mind. If you dread sales calls, freeze up in discovery conversations, or feel physically sick when it's time to ask for the sale, that's not a character flaw. It's neuroscience. Your brain is literally interpreting business development as a threat to your survival. And once you understand that, you can actually do something about it. My name is AJ Riedel. This is Thriving Through, the podcast where each week I have real conversations with seasoned, successful, self-employed consultants about what it really takes to build a profitable and fulfilling consulting practice. Today's guest is Shannon Smith, a Harvard X-verified neuroscience researcher who helps solopreneurs go from terrified of selling to confident in sales conversations. After hitting rock bottom during the 2020 pandemic, living on a broken down boat, struggling with anxiety and constant rumination, Shannon discovered how brain science could transform not just her mental health, but her entire approach to building a sustainable business. In this conversation, Shannon breaks down exactly what's happening in your brain when you avoid prospecting, why traditional sales training fails independent consultants, and how you can use dopamine pattern interruptions and growth mindset to build consistent revenue without feeling pushy or salesy. If you've ever told yourself, I'm not good at sales, this episode will show you why that's a fixed mindset keeping you stuck and what to do instead. Shannon also shares her biggest piece of advice for building a sustainable consulting practice. And honestly, it's not what you'd expect, but it might be exactly what you need to hear. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Thriving Through podcast. Today, my guest is Shannon Smith. Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, AJ. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. I'm excited to dive into your story because you've got this fascinating combination of neuroscience and sales coaching for solopreneurs. So start by telling our listeners, what's your company name and how do you help people escape the corporate world but feel terrified, who want to escape the corporate world but feel terrified of selling themselves, which is most of us as solopreneurs. So tell us more about that.
Sure. Well, so I've found that there are a ton of people out there who have a passion that is not necessarily tied to their corporate jobs. And just to be transparent, the market is really bad right now. People are laying off all the time. There's like an RTO, return to the office. So I can sense out there that people are feeling sort of anxious, maybe even desperate to have some kind of stability on their own. And not only that, but tied to something they actually love doing and don't have to use the word bandwidth or synergy all the time. Um, and so what I do is I help folks who have that passion, who want to help people in their own special way. I help them to be able to sell what they are offering the public. And many people just don't have a background in sales at all. And so it just feels completely foreign to them. They know what it feels like on the other end when they're getting pitch slapped or they're getting the DMs that are kind of going, right for the throat. So they don't want to do that, but they don't know how to navigate this system and potential clients without being pushy, without, committing all of the faux pas that so many of us experience on LinkedIn. And so I find a way to guide them to where they are, to where they want to go, to where they can eventually quit corporate or continue on their side gig, whatever their preference is. But I make them comfy in sales so that they can help people in their own special way.
Wonderful. I can so relate to this. I needed you when I was a self-employed before I became a coach for consultants. I was a self-employed consultant, and I sucked at sales. And I thought I sucked at sales. And I did okay because I did make a living and I did stay in business for over 35 years. But I know that I did not make the kind of money that I deserved to be making. And even now, when I do a discovery call or a sales call with a potential client, I always use AI to critique how I did. And I did that yesterday, and I got a critique that said, there were some really big opportunities where you could have probed deeper on this problem that you missed. And immediately, this inner judge of mine spoke up and said, "You still suck at sales." And that's even though I have been working really hard to overcome that belief, because that is an absolute limiting belief. And on the surface, I would have said, yeah, I've cleared it out. I don't suck at sales. I may not have mastered it, but I'm learning. And yet that little voice yesterday afternoon came in and said, you haven't gotten any better. So
Yeah,
what you do is so, so important.
thank you.
So when we talked in the pre-interview, and I said that when I like to talk to my guests about obstacles, lessons learned, mistakes, and you mentioned having files and files of mistakes from your journey. So I want to take us back to one particular time. Take us back to 2020. You said you were in a dark place.
Oh
What
yeah.
was the moment when you realized traditional sales approaches weren't working for the solopreneurs you wanted to help?
Well, it sort of evolved a little bit differently, AJ. I'll just kind of give you the high level version if that's okay with
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
So I started in sales back before I even started college. I was knocking on doors, I was selling gym memberships, like that kind of hard kind of sales. And so it's always really been in my DNA. I went to school, college. I even wrote my thesis on what makes an effective salesperson because I was always super fascinated with what makes people tick, what makes people buy, what pe makes people not buy. And so I was already going down that journey. If you fast forward a little bit more, I got more into organizational behavior. How do you create broad sweeping change across organizations? Um, from there, that's kind of when in 2020, that little pandemic thingy happened. And I was running my own firm with really big clients, and I had just bought this old boat, 1950 Seiner wooden. So if any boat experts out there know, a 1950 wooden boat is probably bad news bears, and it was. But we were gonna fix it up. The guy who I was with, my partner, was going to be doing that, but he was stuck in a different state. So here I was on this boat. I was anxious. The systems were breaking all the time. The power was going off, trying to run my firm, also trying not to die from COVID, with all this news happening all the time. And so, yeah, I went down to a really, really dark place where I was drinking too much. I wasn't sleeping. I had too much anxiety. I was just ruminating constantly, constantly, constantly. And I ran across a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. And that kicked off a year of deep research into peer-reviewed scientific journal articles in the space of neuroscience. And what I found, because I immediately found, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this other thing. So let's apply it to me and see what kind of results I can get. I saw very quick results. My sleep returned. I wasn't nearly as anxious. I was able to cope with everything that was going on. From there, I put about 30 people through a pilot. They also saw significant changes from 90% reduction in anxiety was reported, procrastination, drinking less, all of the things that I was, some of the things that I was struggling with, but a lot of overlap as well. And so with that, I said, okay, well, this stuff clearly works. Where can we then apply it? And so I came back to my love of sales and said, all right, corporate out here kind of stinks. People are used to having a better quality of life, of not having to recruit, be in traffic, be stuck sitting in their car all day, going into a dingy office with overhead lighting and fluorescent lights zapping and all of those kinds of things. So I wanted to be able to bring this information out to people so that they could be empowered and be able to really live their purpose, even though they don't have that background of sales. So I merged the two of neuroscience and sales. And yeah, so now we're here chatting today.
And that pilot program that you started in 2020, and you got great results from it with the 30 people. Is that what have you, where's that pilot program gone since then?
Yeah, so I actually turned that into a mobile gaming app based in neuroscience research that changes your habits while you play. It's out on Apple and Google, but it's very much still a beta version. There's not too many levels, but honestly, between you and me, what I learned quickly is the people who were coming to me for that probably needed a lot more help than I could give them because they were dealing with big habits, addictions, um, you know, alcoholism, and I got a lot of porn addicts coming to me, and I was like, yes. So then I was like, oh, let's see how sales works into all of these things. But it spurred something in me because, I mean, not only, and I haven't really talked about this much, but I am really looking to get out there how neuroscience can help in a variety of ways. And so that's also through toxic bosses that I'm putting a program together for that. It's also for connecting because in today's world, we are so disconnected, even though technology is at its height. So, how do we then connect back to ourselves? And a lot of people are missing that. So, there's a lot of like different applications, adjust the context, kind of configure it differently, and then it can help for a completely different problem.
So it sounds like rather than narrowing in saying neuroscience and selling, you've gone neuroscience, broader applications.
That is where I'm gonna head. Right now, like on LinkedIn, I'm all about neuro sales, but I feel like there's some deeper areas that I want to touch on where people can really be helped. For instance, like the toxic boss thing, those people can't really look for another job right now because of the market conditions. And so if they're stuck with a toxic boss, I want to bring this research to them so that they can be able, kind of like you and I were talking about earlier this today, because they can get their nervous system in check and be able to continue with their lives without being impacted so adversely. So, yes.
So it sounds like, I mean, I'm kind of in awe of how you can manage to, it's a lot of balls to juggle. So
Yeah.
you've still got it's kind of your core business that's paying the bills, and now you're juggling other ventures while keeping your coaching practice going, your selling coaching neurosales going. How are you juggling all of that without losing focus?
Yeah. There are good days and bad days. I'll just share with the audience. I had a great idea for a new website, which was going to be like the applied neuroscience and wanted to get that up. Hired a developer who just published it without me even looking at it, caused, chaos. My whole day has been chaos. And so there are days that it's super challenging, like today, because I don't like dealing with websites, DNS, domain server crap. I don't like it. And I'm having to do it. I'm having to do it like under the gun. And there are better days where I'm able to do like a slow wake up and journal a little bit and get into my meditation and then deliberately start my day. I would say all up, I think maybe it's a setting inside of me where I continuously have this desire to create because this is really one of my passions. There's a ton of great information in the journals. It just needs to be brought out so people can apply it to their lives and live in a better way.
You said something powerful when we talked, and it kind of relates to this. You keep telling yourself when things slow down, I'll take my thinking days.
Yeah.
And you realize that you control the speed and that things aren't slowing down. So what's really behind that pattern?
Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe a question for a therapist. I think it's probably a little bit of how I was brought up. So I was brought up by a single mother. She worked two jobs. I saw how hard she worked for the little amount that she got. So I think part of it is probably just that I'm trying to rectify that sort of situation in my own life. And the other part of it is probably prioritizing. And I am happy to respond with I did get my thinking date, and I've got another one scheduled for the end of January. But it's it goes back actually to the all up thesis of we have more power and control over our lives than sometimes we think. Now, sometimes it's great because you have an outside source being like, "Hey, why don't you take some of your own advice here?" Because we need that. Like, at least I do. I get very much into the meat of it and the process and trying to drive results that many times other things fall by the wayside in terms of my own self-care and my own thinking days and things like that that are ultimately going to help me continue to be productive in the long term.
Right. It's our brains can be our worst enemies. Because I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about yesterday when my inner judge attacked me about not being good at sales and how could you have missed those opportunities to go deeper? And then fairly quickly, I feel like like I was a boat that was rocking back and forth and starting to sink. And then I kind of righted myself because of all the mental fitness work I've done that uh, enables me to the switch between, in positive intelligence terms, between the sage or survivor brain and the saboteur or survivor brain and the sage brain, or our deep inner wisdom. And uh, so it is we what we don't realize, you said, we have way more power over how we think and where our thinking takes us than we appreciate.
Yeah. And, to what you were feeling earlier about the sales performance, you know, there's always something to improve upon, but it's also very easy, I think, for most people to beat yourself up whenever your own standards aren't met. And so, like, I could sit here and preach all day about how you got to give yourself grace, but, it starts here internally. And that whole self-talk, that actually matters a ton. There's been a ton of science that validate how important positive self-talk is. But yeah, it's easy to say, give yourself some grace, but then are you doing it? That's a different thing entirely.
Which leads me to a question. This morning, when you realized that there was this dumpster fire going on with this web developer who had, gone and taken some leeway or crossed some boundaries that he shouldn't have, what was your self-talk like?
Oh, lots of expletives. Um,
Which sometimes is
well,
good because it blows off steam. Okay, but
yeah.
yeah, a lot expletives. And then what else? How did you kind of get yourself back in balance?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't know if I'm still quite in balance, but what I did try to do to try to accomplish this, because, I knew we were going to have this conversation today, and I've had other meetings, is like, look, everything's going to be okay. You know, if it's down a little while, it's not the end of things. Nobody's going to remember this. You're not going to get like that one huge client. It's only going to look once and then the site's down and they're gone forever. I mean, maybe that would happen, but I just tried to sort of decatastrophize what I was feeling. After, of course, I did a little bit of firefighting, trying to get some of the permissions back. So eventually I was able just to sort of take a step back, be more of an objective observer, and try to de-emotionalize the experience as much as possible so that I could try to come back to, some kind of baseline.
Yeah, some level of equilibrium or equanimity.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to go back to solopreneurs and selling. When you're
yeah.
working with solopreneurs who are brilliant at their craft, but they freeze up when it comes to selling, what's the most common story they tell themselves about why they can't charge what they're worth?
Well, I mean, I I wouldn't even say that's the common story, although I mean that is something I've heard. A big common story is that they don't even do so. For instance, most sales, at least on LinkedIn, are done in the DMs,
Mhm.
and people get very freaked out about going in the DMs, and so they just don't. And so then it's like, I'm too busy creating content to get in the DMs. If they really wanted my help, they would reach out. I don't want to be pushy, all of those things. And so that is what I hear the most is really just the mindset. And so that's why I teach my clients, okay, it's not sales. This is a thinking sport. There is an element of serving, not selling, because if they can start to think about it differently, then everything else is just downhill to where it's going to be a lot more natural to them. Because if they're not feeling like it's their natural language, or they would say that, then they're going to be weird and awkward anyway. That's going to come across. So it's really starting at that root, that mindset, before we even engage in anything.
So you get them to that I don't want to be pushy. Yeah, you hit all of them. I don't want to be pushy. If they, my work should stand for itself. Content should
Yep.
stand for itself. They're going to come to me. It's like, no, this is not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will not come.
I swear.
They have to know about you and know that you
Exactly.
understand them and all of that fun stuff.
For
So
sure. For sure.
you mentioned wanting to, one of your desires is to help people escape soul-sucking corporate environments. And it sounds like you're kind of going even further with the toxic boss thing, new initiative. When someone comes to you fresh out of corporate, what's the gap between their expertise and their ability to communicate that value to their prospects?
Yeah, there's a huge gap. That's why it's like one of the first things we do, like in the foundation. You had kind of talked about, uh, you know, from a client perspective, can your problem be solved by this person? And so if you cannot clearly articulate the problem that you're solving and how you're different, then they're probably not going to be able to get a client. And so very much in the beginning, I spend a lot of time trying to get them to put themselves in their client's shoes so that we can pull that unspoken subtext out of the brain and test it. Because I mean that's kind of the second part. So I volunteer at a startup here in Seattle, and one of the biggest things I see founders do is they go and create in a hidey hole because it's fun. That's what they like to do. That's what gives them the dopamine squirts. But then they never validate with their customers. So when they go out with a launch, nobody wants it. They don't get why. So part of it is really getting them to think from their customer's point of view, the problems, the solutions. What do they want? What is the outcome that your client is looking for? And then the other part is like pulling out that subtext and putting it in the content, the LinkedIn profile, all the things. Because if that client stops and sees, oh, AJ understands my problem very well. It's like she's in my head. She can probably get me to the result. Like it's like half the battle right there. So I think it's just a way of sort of thinking differently again, not being concerned about you, but all about the client and then how you can sort of fit into uh, their problem and how you're going to solve that problem for them.
You said something so important is making sure is communicating in a way that they know that you understand them really well, which then leads to my what I preach with my students is niching. Or I was on a webinar earlier today and she talked about micro niches. And so many consultants and coaches fight that tooth and nail because they think if I narrow down, I'm going to miss all these opportunities. And what's the flaw in that thinking?
Well, if you're a Tony Robbins, probably not much because he kind of, covers everybody and I believe, is doing quite well. Um, so, I mean, there are cases where I've seen it work, but if you don't already have a brand and a team and an empire behind you, you have to be known for something. I would be interested to know what he started out as. Maybe he's always been a generalist. I don't know. Maybe he became a generalist over time. But it is easier to start with a niche and to very clearly articulate, the ICP you're looking for, all the pieces of information that go with that ICP, the subtext, all of it, because then you're very focused. You can solve some problems and then maybe later you can build. And I get it. I hear that too. Like I see on LinkedIn, people have the scrolling, banner. And trust me, I get it. Like I want to help people in a whole bunch of ways. But also if you are too much, then you start to create the neural noise. And if people don't understand what you're offering, or if there's any kind of lack of clarity, you're not going to have a deal. So it's probably easier for someone to start out with a niche from that perspective, at least in my point of view.
So for you, since you're expanding out from just selling to other applications of neuroscience, how are you going to define your niche so that you are able to really hone in on your messaging and the problems you solve when you're going broader on the applications that you're covering?
Yeah, that's a problem we're still sorting, but likely, there's going to be a shift from no pressure sales eventually, not anytime soon, to, the applied neuroscience. I don't have all the messaging there now, obviously, for all of that, but it would be like a slow shift because I don't want to alienate my current community. And then from there, it's going to be, very different landing pages, very different ICPs, very different messaging, all of that. So like the underneath part is fine. Like if you're thinking about it kind of like an umbrella, they won't even know. People who land on neurosales won't know about toxic bosses because it's going to be super different. But the all up piece is the one that, I'm still thinking through as to how I can slowly step into that direction. Because I do love sales, but I can help more people and I want to do more in this fashion. So yeah, you got any ideas, AJ?
Oh, well, I mean, you could easily have different landing pages and different messaging for the different targets. The challenge will be it will be something like LinkedIn, where your profile is a lead generation asset.
Yeah.
And it should be pretty focused so that somebody coming onto your profile knows pretty quickly within 5 or 10 seconds what you do for them. So your biggest challenge is going to be figuring out how to navigate that to be able to communicate to your different ICPs so that it resonates with them. And I don't have any solutions. I know that, if you have different ICPs, you can certainly do messaging on different days. Like today, Monday is my, neuro sales, Tuesday is this, but the profile is becoming so much more important now. At least I know it's always been important, but it seems like just recently it's like it is really before people go to your website or a landing page, they go to LinkedIn and they look at your
Yep.
profile. So it is, that you're navigating uncharted territory there.
Yeah. Yeah. I just I know it's probably not the smartest, especially now that we're talking about all of these things, but I just wouldn't be authentic to myself if I didn't try it.
Yeah,
So we'll
absolutely.
see.
Well,
See how it goes.
and like you said with with your little website development problem, it was easily resolved. You can experiment with different profiles, give them some time, maybe even A/B test, find out what's working, and then pivot. That's the beauty of LinkedIn, that actually makes LinkedIn as a landing page easier to work with than landing pages because you could change your profile in 30 in 15 minutes,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You can't, it takes a little more time to do a landing page.
Yeah. Sure does.
So I want to pivot now because we've been talking about kind of where you want to go. Where do you see yourself and your business in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, let's just do, this ideal, like hypothetical vision board here. So I want to be able to help a lot more people in all those different ways. 3 to 5 years, I'll be a little bit more selective with the speaking engagements and things. And then you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I want to open a elephant rescue slash high-end yoga retreat somewhere in, I really love Da Nang, so maybe Da Nang, I don't know. I spent 2 weeks this past year volunteering at a center in Thailand in Chiang Mai. And I have always loved elephants, but I was just like, okay, ticked and tied. I want to do this. And the woman who's running that current park, it's pretty much like a small town, all the stuff that goes into it. So it was a nice sort of wake up call in terms of all the things that you have to have in place to have a good place for elephants. And so, in 3 to 5 years, I would like to have at least the land bought, maybe the infrastructure set up in some fashion. So, yeah, crazy 3 to 5 year plan, I know.
And then would the yoga retreat fund the elephant rescue and the support of the
Yeah,
elephants?
that's the plan. So when I was there in Thailand, they put the elephants and all the animals first. Like she had 140 elephants, 700 dogs, 1,200 cats, a bunch of water buffalo, monkey, like lots of stuff,
Wow.
right? I know. So, but one of the things she's done is she has built, and her name is Lek. She's fantastic, speaks at the UN Parliament. She's truly an ambassador for animals, but she built the platforms where people walk to where they were high enough to where the elephants can go below and not be bothered by the elephants. So my idea is to make the floor clear so that people can do the yoga, downward face dog, looking at an elephant butt or an elephant, throwing the dirt on its back. And so yeah, that's the plan. High-end yoga retreat feeds into the elephant rescue, and it's like a little symbiotic relationship for everybody.
Cool. In addition to everything else that you're doing?
I'm sure a couple things will fall off, but I don't know. I also feel like, so I spent 8 months traveling this last year. It ended up being a hugely spiritual journey for me, which I didn't anticipate or plan or any of that. And so I've just sort of also realized that what is for me will come to me, and it won't be a battle. It won't be like something where I'm always efforting. So what makes sense, I feel like will just shake out in the natural order of things, which is very anti, it's your 3 to 5 year plan, but that's just how I'm rolling with it, right?
Okay. Yeah. Holding it lightly and
Yeah,
letting the universe or higher power or whatever spirit direct
yeah,
instead of, I like the word efforting. We tend to do that a lot. And we, even further than that, we tend to white knuckle it a lot. I'm going to do this in 5 years. You know?
yes. And I have been guilty of that in the past, and it has not served me well. So,
So this may sound a little indelicate. You had the luxury of traveling for 8 months last year. You've got this 3 to 5 year vision that is going to require some big dollars to do. You must be doing pretty well in your coaching practice to have the to have this.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Okay. So what are you doing in the way, what do you do to sell your services? How do you generate leads and then convert those into clients that has enabled you to be so successful that you have the freedom to travel?
Sure. Well, personal branding is big. I never actually had a plan. See, I didn't have a plan to do this, but I had an investor tell me if you're wanting to publish this app that I was thinking about, a couple years ago, why you? Why should you be the one to talk about neuroscience? And so that was like, oh, I guess I have to build a personal brand. And when you have a strong enough personal brand, what that means is immediate sales in anything you want to launch, support, or invest in. And so the majority of my leads come from LinkedIn. Um, I get several inbounds. I also hold events every now and again where I offer up value. I will build in, some natural sort of sales mechanisms in there where talk about most common objections, what it looks like if you were to fail, what would that look like in the program? Well, you'd still get your messaging down, you'd still get a DM sequence, and so maybe you wouldn't be pulling in what you want to earn a month, but you'd have this much. So it's a event where people get a ton of value, but it's also, a sales mechanism. It's a lead magnet. And so that's a good way. Partnerships has also been really big, co-collaborations. But yeah, I get the majority of my business from LinkedIn.
So when you do an event, do you have enough connections and a big enough following that you can promote your event on LinkedIn and get a good number of people coming, or how do you promote events to make sure that you've got the numbers coming in to your event?
Yeah. I mean, I have 50, almost 59,000 followers. So I do get a good amount, but I mean, you don't have to have 59,000 followers to be successful. That's where the DMs really come in. That's why like people are resisting the DMs so hard. But if you're smaller, especially, that's where you're gonna close your sales. And so, yeah, between, my newsletter, LinkedIn, and any other kind of referrals or inbound leads, there's plenty. Now, when I hold events, like a lot of people will just open it to everybody. I don't do that. I qualify them before I let them into the event, and I make sure that, they're not just going to be not engaged or multitasking. I make it a criteria where you've got to have your camera on and I need you engaged if you're going to get this value, either for free or I don't charge very much for it. So, yeah, with all those levers and mechanisms, I'm able to pull in a good amount.
Okay. And the DM, so do you reach out, what is your what's kind of your cadence for, you know, do you connect with them and then message them, or how do you work it for all those inquiring minds who want to know out there who haven't mastered selling through DMs?
Sure. Well, okay. So there's a lot that go into the DMs, and it is going to be a little bit different if you're bigger versus smaller. And it's also going to vary on your ICP. So if you're going after people who everybody's going after, like CEOs, startup founders who are like seed, Series A, Series B, you're going to have a much more difficult time breaking through the noise. You also just have to make sure that the ICP is on LinkedIn because if they're not, you're going to have a hard time getting clients. Um, so the very first step really is to break through all of the noise. And so that means you should reach out, engage on their post, make a thoughtful comment so that they see you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get past the reticular activating system, the RAS filter. And so that's why you've got to start with engaging from someone's post. Or if they don't have a post, you can look at their profile, come up with something that you can speak to, make it specific, relevant, interesting for them. And then you can start the conversation. And at first, it needs to be all about them first and foremost. But if you can have a genuine curiosity about how maybe they got into the industry or the role or something to that effect, it would vary by ICP, then you can kind of guide the conversation. At some point, you're going to have to see if there's a problem. I've had a lot of people come to me and be like, here, take this, here, take that, here, take that. And it's like, I don't care about that. I don't have a problem with this. I'm not trying to solve anything here. So that's a step that a lot of people miss, is they don't establish that there's a problem that needs to be solved. So once the problem is established that it needs to be solved, then you just very clearly, very plainly, I help X with Y without Z. I think I can help you, but I'd like to have a chat just to make sure. And then that way you can get them on the sales call and that you can close them from there.
Love it. Good advice.
Yeah. And I'll just add too that, there's a lot of neuroscience, at least with my sequence in each and every step. So I talked about the RAS, like the way you go about it, making sure the amygdala is not active, because your first question is, what does this person want from me? Um, and so also vulnerability can be a really powerful tool. It can activate some of the mirror neurons. Like, and if you're sharing something with someone that maybe isn't super comfortable, they're more likely to be open as well. So at least from what I do, I build psychology and neuroscience into each and every step of the sequence.
And do you
And if you
have
want,
Mhm.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I have a couple resources. If you would like, I could make them available to your audience.
Oh, that would be fantastic. We will put those into the show notes for those of you listening. That would be wonderful, because you are
Cool.
definitely an expert in this area that we can all learn from. As we start to wind up the podcast, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you were first starting to monetize your neuroscience expertise, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now, these X years in, these 4+ years in, 5+6, actually?
I know it's just going so fast. I would say to have, and I know this probably sounds a little cliche, but to have more fun with it. Being your own boss is really hard. It involves a lot of hours, patience, tenacity. And so if you can find a way to have fun with it, you are likely to be able to sustain longer. And one of the number one characteristics that makes a successful founder from those who aren't is having that beefy mid-anterior cingulate cortex, which is the tenacity. So something's not really working, let's pivot. Okay, I want something to work better, let's pivot again. Like on the Friends episode. But I would say find a way to weave some fun into it, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy. So that is the advice I would take, is to be more lighthearted and fun with it from the beginning, because in the beginning I was still efforting and banging my head against the wall and I was not having a lot of fun. So fun.
I will, you're speaking to me. Lighten up and make it fun rather than being so darn serious. So I have two wrap-up questions. What book, podcast, or other resource has been most valuable to you in your coaching practice?
Uh, if I have to pick one, I would go back to Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself. It's not directly applicable to sort of the tactics that we're talking about today, but maybe it would give an idea of just how powerful our brains really are.
I'm going to for sure get that book. The Brain That Changes Itself.
Yeah. It
Okay.
talks about a whole bunch of really cool studies and just like anything's possible.
It's not just positive psychology or positivity to say anything is possible because our brains are this incredible neuroplastic thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And actually on that note, super fun study I can send you too, and I know you're trying to wrap up. There is at least one, probably multiple by now, that shows you can get stuck in a positive upward spiral. Because basically you do something good, you feel good. Then you do something good again. Then you feel good again. La 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 la. Upward you go. And so that has been proven by science. So yeah.
I love that. Yes, that reminds me, I'm a big fan of positive intelligence. And
Hmm.
positive intelligence talks about how you have to have three positive thoughts for every negative thought. So 75% of your thoughts have to be positive or coming from your sage brain, your positive brain, to counteract every one negative thoughts.
Hmm.
Because as I think Dr. Rick Hansen said, negative thoughts are like Velcro and positive thoughts are like Teflon. So, and positive intelligence talks about at the 75% level is when the vortex direction changes. Below 75, the vortex is pulling you back into negativity, and above 75%, it's pulling you up.
Nice. Love that. And it correlates with math too. So can we get any better? I don't know.
Exactly. Well, and it's one thing, one of the things I do with my students is I start every session with some wins. And we celebrate the wins, and people feel really stupid doing it. I mean, like throw your hands in the air and dance like you just don't care, kind of celebrate. Because you talked about the dopamine hit, is when we do something, a win, and we have a win, whether it's tiny or big, and we celebrate it, we get a dopamine hit. And then our brain says, oh, I want more of that. I'm going to do whatever activity triggered that dopamine hit. And we just keep getting more wins. So, on that note, I have one more question before I do my last question. What is one win, either personal or business, that you've had this week?
This week, I would say I booked a speaking engagement I was really wanting. So yeah,
Yay.
check us out in
Yay.
Bellevue.
Yes. All right. High five and fist bump. Woohoo. And the last and single most important question, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, where do they go?
Yeah. Normally I would say my website. But hopefully it'll be back up by March. So you can find me at brainhacksbyshannon.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. It's the hot pink and yellow banner. Talk about neurosales for now. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, feel free to reach out uh, for help in sales, any other neuroscience way you want some help, or speaking engagements, et cetera, et cetera.
Wonderful. And we will put the link to your your LinkedIn URL into the show notes. So it'll be easy for them to go there and find you. Well,
Awesome.
Shannon, thank you. It has been delightful talking to you today. And for those of you listening or watching, keep thriving through. I hope Shannon's story resonates with you the way it did with me. The idea that sales anxiety isn't a personal failing, but a brain response we can actually work with, that's game changing for those of us who've spent years believing we just weren't cut out for business development. Here's what I want you to take away from this conversation. First, if you've been telling yourself, I'm just not good at sales, you're operating from a fixed mindset that's keeping you stuck. The truth is, sales is a learnable skill, and understanding the neuroscience behind your resistance is the first step to getting comfortable with it. Second, celebrate your wins, even the tiny ones. It isn't just feel good fluff, it's literally rewiring your brain to want more of the activities that grow your business. So start acknowledging those victories, no matter how small they seem. And finally, Shannon's advice to have more fun with your business, that's not permission to take it less seriously. It's recognition that tenacity and sustainability come with enjoyment, not just grinding through. Find ways to lighten up, and you'll find you can keep going when things get tough. This is advice that I need to take. If you want to learn more about Shannon's brain-based approach to sales, connect with her on LinkedIn or visit her website. Links are in the show notes. And until next time, keep thriving through.